Silence is the sleep that nourishes wisdom. We live in a world drowning in noise. External noise, internal noise, endless thoughts that never stop repeating. And because of that, most people never taste the raw power that exists only in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence where the field becomes audible. The silence where the universe finally speaks. Few discover it, even fewer master it. But once you do, reality itself begins to bend. Stay until the end of this video, because you'll discover the hidden mechanics of silence. Why it unlocks powers that noise keeps buried, how it shifts your frequency instantly, and how those who master it gain access to a level of clarity and manifestation that most will never experience. We live in an age of noise. It is everywhere, saturating your senses. The constant flow of notifications, voices, obligations, demands. But there is a deeper noise, one most people never escape: the inner noise. Thoughts repeating like broken records, emotions playing in endless loops, beliefs echoing so loudly inside the mind that silence becomes almost impossible to touch. And this is why most people never encounter their own power. Because true power is not found in the noise, it is found in silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence. Silence is not emptiness. It is the field itself, raw and untouched, waiting for your signal. Neuroscience confirms what mystics always knew. When the brain is bombarded with constant activity, it locks into default networks. You replay old memories. You recycle old fears. You collapse the same reality again and again. The mind in noise is the mind in repetition. But in silence, the brain reorganizes. Neural pathways shift. The chemistry of the body changes. Stress hormones fall. Coherence rises. Quantum physics gives the same truth in a different language. Silence is space, and space is possibility. The quantum field is not sound or thought. It is the infinite backdrop where all probabilities exist. The more noise you project, the narrower the collapse. The more silence you embody, the wider the field becomes. Silence is expansion. Silence is the opening of doors that noise has kept closed. Ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly silent? Not just without sound, but without the storm of thought. How long has it been since you felt the pure stillness beneath the noise? And if you have never felt it, how much of your life has been lived inside the prison of repetition, mistaking endless noise for reality? Spirit has spoken of this for centuries. The prophets retreated into deserts. The mystics entered caves. The shamans journeyed into forests. Why? Because silence is the only doorway to truth. Not because the world outside disappears, but because the illusions inside finally dissolve. In silence, you stop feeding the mask. In silence, you hear the frequency beneath the mind. And here is the paradox. Silence feels unbearable at first. Because the moment you remove the noise, the truth rushes in. You hear what you've been avoiding. You feel the emptiness beneath the distractions. And most people run from it. They fill the silence with more sound, more thought, more escape. Yet the truth is this: silence is where the prison begins to crack. The invisible bars of thought and repetition cannot survive when you hold silence. Because silence is not passive. Silence is active collapse. Each second of stillness reorganizes the field, expands coherence, and weakens the cycle of noise. So why don't more people discover this? Why, if silence is the key, do so few unlock it? Because they mistake silence for emptiness. They believe it is wasted time. They think silence means nothing is happening. But that is the greatest illusion of all. If silence is the hidden gateway, the field where infinite probability becomes accessible, why do so few discover it? Why does the majority avoid it at all costs, running back to the noise the moment stillness begins? The answer lies in one fatal error. People mistake silence for nothing. From the earliest years of life, you are taught that noise equals life. The louder the environment, the more alive it seems. A child who speaks early is praised as intelligent. A student who fills their time with constant activity is seen as ambitious. An adult who is always busy is celebrated as successful. And silence is judged as absence. If you are quiet, something must be wrong. If you pause, you must be wasting time. This conditioning buries itself deep inside your nervous system. By the time you reach adulthood, you cannot sit in stillness for more than a few moments without reaching for something, a phone, a conversation, a distraction. The discomfort rises too quickly. The mind begins to whisper, "This is useless. Nothing is happening. Do something." And without realizing, you flee from the very state that holds the key to power. The illusion is easy to believe because silence feels empty at first. When the noise fades, when thought slows, you are left with a space the mind doesn't understand. And what the mind cannot label, it fears. That fear drives most people back to repetition, back to the prison of distraction, back to the endless cycle of sound and thought that feels safer than the unknown. But the truth is exactly the opposite. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is fullness. Silence is the raw frequency of the field before it collapses. What feels like nothing is, in truth, the infinite. Quantum physics confirms this paradox. For centuries, scientists believed that a vacuum, empty space, contained nothing. But experiments revealed the opposite. The vacuum is alive with energy, fluctuations, particles blinking in and out of existence. The so-called nothing is, in fact, the foundation of everything. Silence works in the same way. What feels like nothing is the field of all possibility. Noise narrows it. Silence reveals it. Spirit has always spoken of this long before science had the language. Mystics said, "Silence is the voice of God." Shamans entered long trances, using silence as a bridge to the invisible world. Monks retreated into mountains and deserts, knowing that, in silence, the illusions of the mind dissolve and only truth remains. Yogis sat in stillness for hours, teaching that prana, the life force, flows most purely when silence is held. Why then do most people resist? Why, even when traditions across time pointed to silence as the key, does the modern mind reject it so quickly? Because silence reveals what noise hides. The moment you remove the distractions, the truth begins to surface. The unresolved emotions you've buried, the fears you've avoided, the emptiness you've been trying to fill with sound, with action, with repetition. Silence does not create these things. It simply exposes them. And that exposure feels unbearable to the untrained mind. This is the trap. Instead of holding silence long enough for truth to transform, people run back to noise. They confuse discomfort with emptiness. They believe that because silence feels unsettling, it must mean nothing is happening. But the unease is not proof of nothing. It is proof of everything. It is the sound of the cycle breaking. It is the field reorganizing itself in real time. Ask yourself, how many times have you reached for your phone the moment silence entered the room? How often have you turned on music or filled the space with chatter simply because the stillness felt strange? How many times have you missed the doorway to power because you mistook it for a void? This is the error. Silence feels like nothing at first, but only because it is stripping away everything false. The mask cannot survive in silence. The old identity cannot repeat itself when noise is gone. And so the false self panics. It tells you to escape. And most people obey. Neuroscience gives another perspective. Studies show that in stillness, the brain's default mode network, the system tied to self-referential thought and identity, begins to deactivate. This is not emptiness. This is the dismantling of the cycle at the neurological level. But because people are addicted to their identity, the process feels threatening. They run back to the familiar, mistaking silence for loss, when it is actually liberation. This is why silence remains the secret of the few, because the majority will never stay long enough to discover what lies beneath the first wave of discomfort. They will never sit in stillness until the noise dissolves, until the bars of thought dissolve, until the field becomes clear, and so they keep repeating the same mistake, lifetime after lifetime. Noise is celebrated, silence is avoided, and the prison remains. If noise is the prison, then silence is the key. But the question is, how do you hold it? How do you step into silence long enough for its hidden power to awaken? The first wave of silence feels strange, uncomfortable, almost unbearable. That is because your mind, addicted to noise, begins to panic. It tells you, this is nothing, this is wasted time. But if you can stay past the first wave, something extraordinary happens. The noise begins to lose strength. Thoughts loosen their grip. Emotions soften. And beneath it all, you feel the presence of something deeper, the raw field itself. Science explains why. When you sit in stillness, the brain's default mode network, the circuitry tied to your sense of self and constant inner chatter, begins to quiet. The nervous system, once locked in stress and repetition, shifts into coherence. Heart and brain synchronize. Waves slow. Chemistry changes. What felt like emptiness is revealed as order. This is not passive. This is not absence. This is quantum alignment. The moment coherence rises, the field responds. Possibilities expand. Energy reorganizes. The infinite becomes accessible again. So how do you practice it? Start small. 1 minute of silence each day, just one. Close your eyes, breathe, and refuse the temptation to escape. You will feel resistance. You will hear the mind argue. Stay anyway. This is the first initiation. Then extend it. 5 minutes, 10. Allow silence to deepen. At first, you will hear noise louder than ever. Thoughts, memories, fears. But don't confuse this with failure. That noise was always there. Silence is simply making it visible. And the moment it becomes visible, it begins to lose power. From there, create a ritual. Choose a space, a corner of your room, a place in nature. Anchor silence into your life with intention. Light a candle. Sit before it. Let the flame remind you that silence is not absence, but presence. The subconscious learns through ritual. By repeating silence with symbols, you convince the deepest part of your being that stillness is safe, alive, and powerful. And here lies the turning point. The longer you stay in silence, the more you begin to hear. Not words, not noise, but frequencies, subtle impressions, insights that arrive fully formed, as if whispered from beyond thought. This is why mystics described silence as the voice of God. Why shamans heard the forest speak in stillness. Why yogis said prana becomes audible when the mind is silent. Ask yourself, what messages have you been missing, buried under constant noise? How many answers have been drowned out by your addiction to sound and thought? What power has been waiting for you in the silence you always avoided? The final step is embodiment. Silence cannot remain only in meditation. It must spill into your daily life. Walk through the world with inner stillness, even as noise surrounds you. Pause before reacting. Breathe before speaking. Carry silence as your baseline frequency, not just as a practice. This is when silence becomes power, when it stops being a ritual and becomes your nature. And in that moment, the field responds. The noise that used to dominate you loses command. The cycles of repetition dissolve. You are no longer collapsing reality from the chaos of thought, but from the coherence of silence. And reality has no choice but to mirror it. If silence is the key, then what happens when you never touch it? What is the price of living in noise forever? The answer is sharp. You lose yourself. Noise consumes attention. It keeps the mind trapped in endless cycles. The more you drown in sound, whether from the outside world or from your own inner chatter, the less you hear the subtle signals of the field. And without those signals, you collapse the same probabilities again and again. The prison stays intact, not because silence is missing, but because you refuse to enter it. Think of how your days unfold. Constant activity, endless scrolling, background sounds filling every gap. But what hides behind this flood? The very thoughts you fear, the emotions you suppress, the truths you avoid. Every moment you run from silence, you also run from yourself. And by running, you repeat. Neuroscience proves this. A brain that never enters stillness stays locked in stress patterns. Cortisol rises. The nervous system burns out. Creativity dies. In constant noise, the brain cannot reset. It cannot expand. It can only recycle the past. Quantum physics tells the same story in its own way. Observation collapses reality. But if your observation is chaotic, scattered, noisy, repetitive, then your collapse reflects that chaos. Without silence, there is no order, no expansion, no access to new probabilities. Ask yourself, how many choices in your life have been made out of reaction instead of silence? How many times have you spoken words you didn't mean, repeated actions you regret, simply because you never paused to let silence reorganize your state? How much of your future has already been lost to the prison of noise? Spirit has always warned of this. Shamans described people who died in noise before they ever heard silence. Mystics said, the one who cannot bear silence cannot bear truth. Even psychology agrees. Without moments of stillness, the subconscious mind rules unchecked, and patterns dominate unconsciously. And here is the paradox. Silence is free, always available, always waiting. Yet the majority spend entire lifetimes avoiding it. They believe noise is safety, when it is actually the cage. They mistake silence for absence, when it is the only presence that matters. How many more days will you live without silence? How many more futures will you collapse from the chaos of repetition? How much longer will you bury the voice of the field under the endless noise of thought? Right now, as you hear these words, silence is rising. Not outside, inside. Beneath every thought, beneath every sound, there is a stillness you've been ignoring your entire life. And in this moment, it is becoming impossible to ignore. Pause. Notice it. Between one breath and the next, there is a gap. Between one thought and the next, there is space. That space is silence. And silence is not empty. It is alive. It is the frequency of creation itself. Quantum physics points to this truth. Every particle vibrates within a field of stillness. Movement arises only because silence holds it. Noise exists only because silence allows it. Without silence, there would be nothing to collapse into form. Silence is the foundation, the field itself, and you are standing inside it right now. Spirit says the same in its own language. Mystics called silence the language of God. Yogis called it the seat of prana. Shamans called it the doorway between worlds. What they all discovered was simple. When you touch silence, the illusion of separation dissolves. You stop being a fragment. You become the field. Ask yourself, can you feel it now? That subtle weightlessness behind your thoughts? That presence that doesn't need words? That is silence. And the moment you notice it, power begins to unlock. But here is the paradox. Silence doesn't beg for your attention. It waits, always, patient, eternal. And the moment you turn toward it, the cycle of noise begins to die. The prison of thought begins to collapse. Freedom is not in the future. It is in this moment of silence, right here, right now. The field is responding already. As you hold even a second of stillness, your frequency changes. The noise that has ruled you weakens. The probabilities before you expand. A new reality waits, and silence is the bridge that carries you into it. Silence has been with you from the beginning, before your first thought, before your first fear. Even before your first breath, silence surrounded you, held you, prepared you for life. It has never left. It waits beneath every sound, beneath every distraction, beneath every mask you've worn, patient, eternal, watching you run from it, yet never withdrawing its presence. And now, after all the noise you've carried, after all the storms you've repeated, you've touched it. For the first time in a long time, you felt the weight of stillness rising inside you, the field revealing itself in the gaps between thoughts, the hidden power you've mistaken for nothing your entire life. But here lies the truth. This experience is fragile unless you seal it. Because the moment you return to the noise of the world, the cycle will try to rebuild. The prison of sound and thought will close around you again, convincing you that silence was just an illusion, that nothing really changed. That is the voice of repetition. That is the addiction to noise. And it will fight to survive. This is why you must seal this moment. You must turn this glimpse of silence into a permanent broadcast. How? By declaring it, by aligning with it, by embodying it. First, declare it. In the comments, write one word: silence. That word is not for me. It is not for the algorithm. It is for the field. When you type it, you are collapsing silence into form. You are telling the universe, I have seen it. I have touched it. I am choosing it. That single act of declaration becomes a frequency, a seal, a key. The field mirrors it back, and silence begins to expand in your life. Second, subscribe. But don't think of it as pressing a button. Think of it as alignment. Every time you return here, you are choosing the signal of silence over the noise of the world. You are anchoring yourself in a current that reminds you again and again of the truth you've always carried. Without alignment, the world will drown your silence in its chaos. With alignment, you amplify the broadcast until it becomes unshakable. Third, embody it. Silence cannot remain on this screen. It must enter your life. Begin with 1 minute a day. Sit in stillness, breathe into it. When the noise rises, do not run, stay. That single act weakens the prison more than 1,000 distractions ever could. With time, expand it. 5 minutes? 10? Carry silence into your actions. Speak less, listen more. React less, breathe more. Let silence flow into your presence until others feel it when you enter the room. That is when silence becomes power. That is when the field mirrors it without resistance. And finally, walk forward, knowing this. You are not the same person who pressed play. The seed of silence has been planted. The prison has already cracked. And no matter what the noise tells you, you cannot go back to blindness. Once silence is felt, it cannot be unfelt. It will call you again and again until you answer fully. So do not let this moment pass. Declare your word. Subscribe to the signal. Embody silence until it becomes who you are. And when the noise comes, as it will, remember that silence is not far away. It is always here, always waiting, always ready to collapse a reality larger than the one you've known. Stay with this channel. Stay with this current, because silence is just the first key. And in the next video, we'll go deeper, beyond silence, into the frequencies that shape destiny itself.